lot of companies and software developers even don't realize quite how much of their system is made from open source software these days. One of my hats here at MergeBase is an academic hat. I publish in journals and conferences, academic conferences, about software provenance and open source reuse in software systems. And one of our recent contributions was a methodology for counting the proportion of open source in industrial and commercial systems. And as part of that paper, we saw that for most systems, usually over 95% of the lines of code in the software system were actually coming from open source libraries. Right? So if you look at an average software system that you've developed at your company and you're running, you might be surprised if you were to look closely and count every line of code in that running system. Is it open source? Is it in-house proprietary? You might be surprised to realize, 97% or more of that system probably is open source. This is a huge percentage, right? Like, we're looking at a ratio of 30-to-1 of the lines of code. 30 lines of code are open source for every one line of code that's proprietary. That gives you a sense of how important it is to make sure you're staying on top of the known vulnerabilities in those libraries. They comprise the majority of your system. And in that way, I think we can almost naturally understand that they also comprise the majority of the risk. Known vulnerabilities in open source libraries are simply like, mechanically reproducible, right? Like the bad guy, the adversary, is going to just take this vulnerability and just try it against your system and then the next system and the next system. It's just, repeatable mechanical process, making it much scarier when you have these known vulnerabilities in your system. So for this reason, I think SCA is a very critical part of any company's application security plan. So, once you realize, okay, we've got a ton of open source in here, way more than we realized, what are we going to do about it? Yeah, you're going to have to take an SCA solution. Customers come to us and they're like, well, there's no way you're going to be more accurate than this company with, who knows, $1 billion of investment that they've raised, or this company that's been around for 20 years, right? But we invite them, try them out, scan your system with us, with them. Let's take a look at the results. And, time and time again, they come to us and they're like, you missed a vulnerability. And we're like, why don't you take a closer look? And so, yeah, we've had this experience many times where other scanners are reporting more vulnerabilities than we do, but it turns out that's because they're reporting false positives, which comes back to, one of our founding pain points when we started this company, is that we just found there's too many false positives in this space. And it was very frustrating for ourselves as, hands-on engineers trying to grapple with this problem in our own systems. The false positives were really frustrating us. And so that's one of the reasons we actually started MergeBase was, we need a tool with a better false positive rate that's more accurate. And our customers agree. A lot of the upgrades I was then tasked with implementing, were almost impossible. Like I remember that I needed to upgrade our version of Wicket, a popular open source web framework at the time, but I wanted to upgrade one library of Wicket, but then Wicket was forcing me to upgrade all these other libraries in a way that ended up being incompatible with the system. And so I was essentially cornered. I was stuck. I was going to need to upgrade 20 or 30 libraries to achieve a reduction of one known vulnerability, an important one. But this in turn was going to cause, regression risk, refactoring, upgrade pain. And so, yeah, MergeBase was really co-founded to tackle these issues head on, both the high false positive rate that I was seeing with SCA tools in the industry, as well as this upgrade complexity, this situation where you can't just upgrade one library without requiring to do a ton of work. So in that way, MergeBase offers a low false positive rate. We also offer some interesting runtime mitigations so that you can surgically address the vulnerability in some cases directly inside the library. In the SCA space and in application security in general, there's kind of an interesting paradox that happens where there's this whole movement and momentum towards shifting left, that is, towards fixing the problems as early as possible in the development lifecycle. And yet, what we're trying to protect is production, right? Production is where the data is, production is where the software is running. And so that's an interesting paradox. I think we really need tools that actually can address either side of this software development lifecycle, right? We need tools that, yes, help us address the problems as early in the development lifecycle as possible, because that's where it's cheapest to fix them, and that's where ultimately they need to be fixed anyway. However, we do need tools that can look at production systems and piloting systems and QA and test systems and staging systems, but especially production systems. We need tools that can analyze those accurately to tell us, well, what are the real vulnerabilities in the running system? Maybe it was configured differently. Maybe some additional plugins or libraries were installed later during the process. Maybe production is a little bit different compared to what was running in development. Right? So it's very important to get a very accurate picture of the known vulnerabilities in that system. And so this approach of being able to deal with any phase in the development lifecycle is central to MergeBase's approach. And so that's why we build tools that can help you, block a GitHub PR pull request very early in the development lifecycle, but we can also help you surgically instrument running library in production to help you see, is it being used, are vulnerable parts of it being exercised. MergeBase's ability to scan binaries directly is really a critical feature for actually securing your applications, especially your production applications. Right? Think about it this way. For example, suppose you wanted to look at a chocolate cake and make sure it didn't have any gluten in it because you were gluten intolerant, right? Well, are you going to take the recipe and send that to a scanner and be like, oh, this recipe is gluten-free? Or do you want to analyze the cake itself? The cake is the thing you're actually going to eat, right? The cake is the thing that needs to not have gluten in it. It's similar for applications, for running deployed production applications. You want to make sure the known vulnerabilities aren't there in the running production system. And in order to analyze them accurately, you need to look at their binaries. It's the binary that's actually executing, and so therefore it's the binary that's going to have the known vulnerability in it if it does indeed have one. MergeBase provides a technical debt report. In this report, we focus specifically on the technical debt of, out-of-date libraries. This is considered an important form of technical debt that application developers need to address in their systems, right? You need to keep your libraries up to date. This is on the OWASP top 10. So the technical debt report, it looks at all the libraries in your system, and it looks at two aspects of each library. One, it looks at when did you last upgrade it, and second, it looks at when was the library itself last upgraded, like when did the development team for that library last publish a release of that library. And so by looking at those two dates, we can quickly provide a report to you and your developers to help you prioritize your patching and upgrading efforts. So for one, you can, quickly upgrade all the libraries that have recent releases where you yourself have fallen behind on them. And secondly, you can look at the libraries that are no longer actively maintained. For example, we've observed libraries and systems where there hasn't been a new release in over 12 years. And so by having this technical debt report, that can help you prioritize some of your, I would call that deprovisioning or off-ramping some of the libraries in your system. And one of my favorite experiences as a car owner is they key in the VIN, the vehicle identification number, and then they give me a report right then and there while I'm getting the oil change on if, steering system or some hydraulic system or anti-lock brake system, any system that has a recall, right? And I just, it's magical to me, right? I go and I get an oil change, and then Other things that turns out there were serious security risks with, which could have potentially harmed me while I was driving the car, are fixed for free. I mean, of course, I'm going to have to come in a week later and schedule that, but you know, they just magically are able to tell me the parts in your car are not safe. We are going to fix them for free as part of this recall. So software is now similarly built from parts, but there's a real gap in the software industry in that there's no recall system, right? There's no coordinated recall system between the companies building the software and the companies building the parts. So that's part of why we founded MergeBase, is to help implement a parts recall system for the software industry. We want to get accurate known vulnerability data into the hands of developers quickly and effectively, and as accurately as possible. We don't want to waste developers' time, but we want to get them that data, that information that they need to help them implement that patch and get that upgraded safe library into their system as soon as possible.